Welcome to the Prime Property Finance Podcast with Gareth Morgan and Mark Watts. This unique podcast will dive deep into all areas of property investing finance, going behind the scenes with property professionals, investors and clients. Between us, we have 35 plus years experience in property finance. The podcast has been launched to share knowledge, mindset requirements and experiences of successful investors and professionals. We aim to simplify many of the complicated areas of finance and investing and provide valuable and easy to implement tips. Keep an eye out for our new longer episodes every Tuesday and our shorter ones every Friday.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Prime Property Finance Podcast. My name is Mark, and in today's episode, we're going to look at the end of the Buy-Refurbish-Refinance process, so focusing on the refinance element. This is a short episode, so it's going to be very high level, but we are seeing a bit of a trend in the marketplace at the moment where lenders are becoming a little more skeptical over the increased values and the justifications needed to do the refinance sooner rather than later. So if your chosen strategy is Buy-Refurbish-Refinance and you're considering a refinance, this is definitely the episode for you to stay to the end on. And we'll try and unpack some of what that is and how you can try to circumvent some of the challenges that exist in the refinance element of this. So without further ado, let's dive straight into it. So Buy-Refurbish-Refinance, one of the most popular and most effective ways of growing a portfolio quickly, portfolio property. So that's where you buy at a price, you add some value to it, whether that be usually doing some refurb, and then you would refinance that at a higher value. Subsequently pulling out all or a large proportion of your invested cash, which frees up the cash to go again, and so on and so forth. Okay, very much touted in the marketplace as the strategy to do. And that's not wrong, but it does come with its challenges. So just want to focus on some of the refinance challenges that we see in the marketplace. So Buy-Refurbish-Refinance takes many different guises. The most popular one, as it says, when you spend money on a refurb, and then you want to refinance. Now, that's relatively straightforward to evidence to a lender why the uptick or the uplift in value, okay? So you would have done X amount of work to the property, and subsequently that will now be worth more, and so on and so forth. There'll be comparable evidence to show all of that. Okay, however, the dynamic changes where you do less work to the property. So, for example, you may have bought particularly well. So somebody may have come to you as an opportunity, you're a seasoned landlord, you're known in the marketplace, and someone's going, look, I just want to get out. We're seeing some people now leave the property sector due to all the regulatory changes and taxes and what have you. And landlords are trying to offload their investment property to other landlords, often at a reduced purchase price, just to make that move as quickly as possible. So the chances are you're going to be doing limited to no work on the property. However, there is an opportunity there to acquire the property, sometimes cash or using bridging finance, and then looking to refinance that at a higher market value because you bought particularly well. You may have changed the use of the property from, say, a single let to a HMO or something along that lines. But ultimately, the amount of money you've spent on it is low in comparison to what it is you're trying to refinance out at. So those are the ones that we seem to be having more difficulty with. There's certainly a lot more due diligence or a lot more questions that we need to answer for in terms of the lender. So I just wanted to explain why, really, as to why we're seeing that. And as I say, some of the insights really from what the lenders are looking at in that. So you may or may not be aware that if you acquire a property today and you wish to refinance immediately, not all lenders will do what we consider a day one refinance, okay? There's a handful of lenders that will allow you to refinance within 6 months of ownership of a property, okay? Now, that may not necessarily be at the now new market value if you believe the property value's gone up, but there is that 6 month window. And then you've got all lenders will refinance or enable you to refinance outside of the 6 month window, okay? Now, the question remains, which figure are they prepared to refinance you at? Are they refinancing you at the purchase price? Or are they actually refinancing you at the full market value? And this is where the distinction differs somewhat between lenders. Okay, so we're focusing on you wanting to refinance at the new market value as a result of you not doing a great deal of work on the property. So what are some of the main considerations then? And there are ultimately two things at play here. around why a lender's appetite might be a bit limited, or you may have to answer far more questions as to why the property value is what it is. Okay, so first thing I want to bring to your attention is something called high velocity leverage. Okay, sounds really grand. Basically what it is you're moving at pace through your investments, you're recycling your equity. It's a great tool. However, that does come with it an element of risk as well, especially if you're newer to a property and you don't have the experience of managing properties and so on. So the way that's perceived is that this is like a compounded risk. So you buy one, you've successfully done it, you've pulled some of your money out, you want to reuse that equity and go again. Okay. Now, lessons are learned over time and experience. The shorter the time frame that you're trying to do this, arguably the fewer the lessons and so on and so forth. So there is more room for risk. And the argument here is that you haven't had time for that property to settle in, get the experience, run through a term of being a landlord and that sort of stuff as well. Okay, so the risk here is that you'll have limited cash resources because you haven't had the portfolio or the properties long enough to hold back the money, and you're obviously trying to recycle your own cash. So there will be a risk here. Could you cover voids and those sorts of things? If something went wrong in the next project's build cost, do you have capacity or the resources to fund that mistake or anything like that? If the valuation doesn't stack up on the next one and so on and so forth. Okay, so high velocity leverage works when everything goes well. The issue here is there's not enough time and slack in the system for when things don't go so well. And that's ultimately what lenders are concerned about, is that are you moving too fast through the process? Remember, lending is all about risk, and not all lenders want to take equal levels of risk. You want the cheapest rate. The cheapest rate commands the lowest level of risk, and so on and so forth. So there's a bit of a mismatch in that regard as well. So managing your expectations, if you go down this road of which lenders you're likely to use, will also help determine then what you can expect in terms of interest rates and so on. You're not going to get your vanilla sort of rates if you're trying to do this really quickly. You're going to need to work with lenders that perhaps have a better understanding or are more empathetic to what you're trying to do, and have a slightly different risk profile, and therefore you're going to pay for that privilege. So just bear that in mind. Now, the next thing is something called seasoning. Now, again, it sounds more complicated than it is. All it refers to is the period that a lender expects a property's value and ownership to stabilize before they will look at a new value. Okay, so again, we refer back to time. How long has it gone from purchase at one price through to wanting to revalue at a now higher value? Okay, has that purchase price, has the value had time to season into the marketplace? Okay. That coupled with regulatory pressure and risk exposure. So what you'll find is, and this is where all the questions ultimately come from, is the underwriter has to defend the uplift in value in such a short space of time. And they have to defend that to their risk teams and their auditors and so on. So, we've seen the crashes of 2008 through inappropriate lending. Obviously, there are now safeguards in place to help mitigate the risk of that going forward. So that's what we'll have. Ultimately, if they can't evidence the reason for the uplift, i.e. through works done and the receipts and the schedule of works and everything like that, then you're going to have a hard time getting them to agree to remortgage this property at the higher value. Okay. Now, I understand how that can conflict with some of the messages out there about Buy-Refurbish-Refinance, and plenty of people do this successfully. The point of this podcast is to highlight some of the challenges that exist, that it's not always a smooth road to Buy-Refurbish-Refinance. There are nuances within everything, and we need to consider those as part of your strategy going forward. So, for example, if we are involved in the buying exercise, we will have a very sharp eye on the exit and the refinance and everything you want to do. So if you're telling us that, Mark, I've got a property, I want to complete on that today, I can get that work done in 2 months, and I want to be out of that bridge loan in 3 months. Clearly, that's going to be well within the 6-month range that I spoke about earlier. There is clearly going to be some risk at high velocity leverage, and there is going to be absolutely no seasoning going on here. So these are the things that we need to consider. And then what we want to do is to build the picture and the evidence that's required to then take that to the underwriter to give them the confidence that they can lend at the much higher value. Okay, so that's kind of the thought process that go in on the refinance. It's not always as complex as I just sort of made out. Some of them will take 6 to 9 months. And as I say, this has successfully happened over and over again for many, many investors. Okay. I just want to highlight some of the consideration and why you may be asked more questions on this particular refinance than if you just had a property for 5 years and wanted to do an equity release or a second charge or just pull some capital out of that. So an entirely different set of circumstances that present different risks, hence different sets of questions. Okay. And that's the main point that we want to drill down in today's episode. So if you are a property investor, if buy, refurb, refinance is your strategy, then please take note of these bits of information. They will be important. Forearmed is forewarned. So if you know you're going into a project and it's going to get turned over quite quickly, make sure you build up your bank of evidence as you go through. So things such as before and after pictures, a schedule of works, keep receipts for the works that have been done. I know one bank has just asked us, or one lender rather, or just asked us to produce all the receipts for any notable expenditure on the property, which, again, you may or may not have done that. So just keep a bank and a file of that. You will be asked for it. So the more prepared you are, the easier the process is going to be in refinancing that as well. Okay. So just bear that in mind. If you are, as I say, working on this, then, and you're having difficulty trying to get yourself out of a short-term facility because you can't get the values you're after, then do please give us a shout. We'd be more than happy to help. Contact details, as always, are in the show notes. I hope you found that useful. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you in the next one. Take care, guys.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We hope you have learned something and have some tips to take away. We'd be very grateful if you enjoyed the show. You could give us a review and share with anyone that you know that may be interested. And of course, subscribe to the show so you can get notified when a new episode is released. If you'd like us to answer any questions or go deeper on a specific topic, please drop us a message at primeproperty.finance. See you on the next episode.